Hi, I'm Susan King. I'm the Dean of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm very honored on this homecoming weekend to welcome back Rebecca Wesson Darwin.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And we're always bragging that everybody who's a star like you in the journalism world is our student, but I have to say you didn't major here.
No, I was a history major here with thoughts of going to law school. That was my plan, but I wanted to go and live in New York for a year after college. And so I went to the school and had an internship at GQ magazine, and that's how I more or less fell into the business of magazines.
So a great lesson for all students. One, get an internship.
Absolutely.
What is it that draws Southerners to New York City? I find our students really want to go there.
Yeah, well, you know, I was an out-of-state student here at UNC, all the way from South Carolina, but yet out of state. And I met a number of people while I was here from New York and New Jersey, and just had this desire to go and try to make my mark in the big city. And after I went for the school and then the internship and was offered a job when I graduated, I just stayed. I was in love with it. I probably would still be there if some other things hadn't happened in my life.
Well, we might talk about them a little bit, but I've always been amazed that there is this tremendous tradition of great UNC graduates of all schools going to New York and making a mark.
Yeah, I do think that there is a little bit of that feeling that you've got to work a little bit harder and try a little bit harder, and therefore I think many of us in the business have been very successful in New York.
So what did you learn in New York during those times that has brought your magazine, which you have a copy there, Garden and Gun, which is the hottest magazine of the last couple of years? What is it that you learned at that moment, because there's been deaths and lives to the magazine world in New York? What was it you learned there that you could take to the South to make this such a success?
Well, you know, I had the pleasure of working for some of the best companies. I spent a great deal of my career at Condé Nast. I also worked with Rupert Murdoch on a magazine called Mirabella, and then I was at Time Inc. But I never had the easy jobs at any of those places. I mean, they may sound, you know, working at GQ now sounds very cushy, but it was quite challenging at the time that I was there. Publisher of the New Yorker, but I was brought in to turn the New Yorker back around because it was losing incredible amounts of money. And so I think what I learned was how to do things the right way, first of all, learning from the best. But I also learned this entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, that I didn't know I had. But so when I came back south and started Garden and Gun, I really had been doing a lot of those things all along, but I just had the backing of a big company and a big machine behind me, and all of a sudden I had to go buy my own paper clips and, and figure out, you know, how are we going to set up the computers and do all of this.
Well, the great magazines are so much a part of the American story, but they do come and go. They come into vogue and out of vogue.
Yes.
What is it about magazines that draw people? I grew up on Life, and I loved Life, and it died. Saturday Evening Post died. What is it about the cycle of a magazine?
Well, I think there are two kinds of magazines. There are magazines perhaps like a Life, that those are the ones that I think are having a hard time now, that are more certainly news driven, but more just really general interest, whereas magazines that are very niche focused now I think are the ones that are doing well. And I think if you can find a niche that spans more than just 2 or 3 years of a person's life, then there is that opportunity for success in magazines. I mean, I remember, you know, probably 20 years ago being asked to speak about print being dead, and print has changed, certainly, but print is not dead. And I think that if you produce a magazine that has good content and things that people want to read, and you treat people like they're smart, that there's absolutely still room for magazines in this world.
But a niche magazine, is that it? Not because Time Inc., which is one of your employers, they're struggling right now.
Yeah, they're very much struggling. I mean, Time Magazine, a dear friend of mine is the editor there, and she's brilliant, but she's got a very difficult job to try to turn that thing back around. But yes, I think niche publications, and you know, from very small niches, that's not what I'm really talking about, but I think a magazine like Garden and Gun that is very specifically targeted to a group of people, be they Southern or people who just have an interest in the lifestyle that the magazine is about, they feel like the magazine is speaking directly to them and it's their friend. I mean, a good magazine is your friend. It's somebody you want to sit down and have coffee with.
I like that. But I also loved one of the quotes that I found about you, This is a magazine for adventure-bound, art-loving, skeet-shooting lifestyle people. I just love that idea. When you were sitting down, you moved back to Charleston from New York. 'Cause
Right.
I think that was part of it, with your husband.
Right.
Who was a minister,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
starting a church. You had to sit down and come up with an idea.
Right. Right.
Tell me how that formed.
Well, when I got back, I realized that there was a group of people in the South that are very sophisticated and very worldly and probably do read a lot of other magazines. Let's say Condé Nast Traveler and Departures and Vanity Fair and whatever it is that they read. But it wasn't speaking their language. And I think what we have done with Garden and Gun is we have taken people and a place and the stories that relate to that, and we have made it very personal. And so people see themselves in the pages of this magazine. And so, or they literally know, the person that we've written about, or they have lots of suggestions of things that they think that we should write about. So I think that's the formula and it's not a formula. That's the wrong thing to say, but that's what's working for us. It's a very personal connection.
Well, I definitely can see it's not a formula when
Right.
I look through it, because it's not every third page I know that's where there's going to be here's hot shopping.
Right.
And back it's going to be a recipe. You change it, there's something mysterious every time you get the
Right.
new edition.
Right. And yet, I'm not an editor. I'm not a journalist. I came up on the business side of magazines. But when we first started, I found myself the editor of the second and third issues because the person that we had started with didn't work out until we brought in an excellent editor who brought real order to the magazine. And I do think that magazines have, much like a novel, they kind of build up and you get to the real meat of the matter and then you kind of cool down. And a well-edited magazine, I think, does do that.
Do you look at some of them and know it's wrong, and look at others and know you've just hit it right on the way? And how do you know that?
You mean the story,
The edition,
the
the
issues
whole,
of the
the
magazine?
issue.
I have to say that I haven't seen one that I thought this wasn't right. And the best thing is that I think it gets better and better and better every issue. And we've got so much ground to cover that we will never run out of stories to cover in this magazine. I mean, certainly the South is a great place for storytelling, and there are lots of stories to be told. But occasionally I've seen a cover that I thought, we're taking a chance here, or this is not my favorite, but that's been a while too. And if you put a dog on the cover, it's going to sell.
Looks like my dog, in
Oh.
fact, here in the South. But let's talk about money, because you mentioned the entrepreneurial self that
Right.
you are. I mean, you had some hard going. You had money behind you when you started, and then it got pulled out.
Right. That was one of the biggest days of my life when I found out that the company that was backing us was not going to continue to. It was right in the midst of the deep recession there. But I knew that we had something going with this magazine, and there were so many things that we were really poised to take that next right step. And so I went to my partner and said, we cannot let this happen. We have to buy this magazine and we have to keep it going. And I'm not personally in a position to be able to throw a lot of money against something, nor was he. And so we worked with our writers, we worked with our suppliers, we worked with our paper people, and we just said, please bear with us. Because as you well know, advertisers were not paying at that time either. You were lucky if you were getting paid at all. So I spent a lot of time during that time out trying to bring in a friendly investor to the magazine, which we were able to do, and we made it through. But it is a business. This is very definitely a business. I started it with a passion and feeling that there was a need, but I didn't want to do if it wasn't going to be a serious, successful business. And knock on wood, it's turned out all right.
And what would you tell young entrepreneurs, young creatives, young journalists, young communicators, what they need in this time of indecision and not clear markets? Mm-hmm. What do they need to think about and do if they want to do something like this?
Well, I think it's great to see all the good ideas that young people have. But I think it's smart to take a step away and make sure that you're not just falling in love with something that is your personal idea or your personal passion. I always say you need to make sure that there is a need in the marketplace. And that's where it all starts. If there is a psychographic need, there is a void, which is what I felt with Garden and Gun, then you create your editorial or your content around that. You put it out in the marketplace. your circulation or your audience or what, your viewership comes along with you. And out of that, then you have this audience that has certain demographic characteristics, and then you're able to go out and sell the advertising. But if you start by thinking kind of backwards, that you're going to, you want to do something that's going to have this kind of advertising, and it's not going to work that way. I spoke a couple of weeks ago at Yale, actually, and taught a class on branding and building a brand, and it was the same kind of thing. You can't start by just saying, I'm going to go create a brand. You can have an idea for a brand, and you can create your product, and you can put it out there, but it's your audience that ultimately decides what your brand is all about and defines what your brand is, I think.
That's interesting. Because they reject something that's not authentic to them.
Yes, and they're going to mold it like as they see fit. So if you do so the point going back to, just don't necessarily follow your passion, really kind of think through all the steps of what it's going to take, and don't be afraid to ask.
But the brand also means you're not just a magazine, you are a lifestyle. So
brand.
you connected a number of businesses to this brand, right?
And it was my vision in the beginning that we would be a lifestyle brand, but I didn't go out and say that. I made sure that what was at the core of what I thought was going to be that brand was solid and on very solid ground and could be able to support some brand extensions.
And digital. We're in an era of digital. Do you have to be digital, or can you, because you're glossy and beautiful, but video can be pretty beautiful too.
Oh, yes. Well, we did not jump into the digital world immediately. We actually didn't have a tremendous demand for it from our readers, but it was something we knew we wanted to do. But we kind of held back, let some of the other people make some of the mistakes first, and then we came along. We launched our digital edition in June last year, and we were nominated that year for a National Magazine Award as Best Digital Edition. We lost to National Geographic, but that's okay.
It's a pretty good brand.
Yeah. So it's very, it's growing in importance to us, and I think, for us, we're certainly going to get some new readers through digital, but I think it's more. A lot of it is the person who's traveling and wants to read the magazine on their device as opposed to carrying the magazine along, because they love to save the magazine. They don't want anything to happen to their magazines. They hold on to all of them.
So it's not either or, it's either and, or it's both and.
Yes.
So Leslie, that name, pretty risky, huh?
Yes, my no-nonsense name. I often say I could have named it New Southern Magazine and it would have been a big snore, I think. I wanted to go out there with something that would pop, and I knew it might be controversial, but I think it was worth the risk. And when I first heard the words Garden and Gun, because there was a club in Charleston called the Garden and Gun Club, I could just picture what this magazine, could be. And so for me, the garden is the land, and that's really what everything in the magazine comes out of. The music, the art, the architecture, the design, it all, the food, of course, comes out of this love of the land. And then the gun is the sporting life, which is one of the key pillars of the magazine.
So risk, talent, quality, something that looks good, and passion that pays.
Yeah.
That's Rebecca. And Garden and Gun. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
It's been terrific.
Thanks.